Hey, welcome to episode number 20 of the Go-To Physio podcast. In this episode, we talked to a therapist who went from 2 to 3 patients a week to now having online patients all over the world. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Go-To Physio podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan and thank you very much for your attention today. Now, today again, we're going to go back into applying the content that we've talked about over the first 15 or so episodes and show you how therapists are implementing this in the real world. And we've got a really good guest today that certainly, and he won't mind me saying this, is a great inspiration for a lot of therapists. And, what this therapist has done in the last 12 months is phenomenal. And from my point of view as well, obviously I really enjoy working with all therapists that are inside of mentorship, and we've got a process that we go through obviously to make sure that we've got the right therapists in there who are in there for the right reasons and are hungry, and obviously most importantly that we can actually genuinely help them. But every so often you get a therapist who it sounds a bit cliche, but you learn a lot from your students. And certainly when Dave came over to the refreshers and when he was up in Dublin, I'll make some jokes with him that I'm going to rob some of the stuff that he's done when he's taken on the content, and it really makes me happy when I see therapists they take the mentorship content and they understand it, they strive to understand it, and then they make it their own. Okay, and I always talk about that. I'm not trying to get therapists to be a clone of myself, far from it. What I want you to do is I want you to take the stuff that you're doing already that's really good, and put it together into your system. And if you know anything about me by now, you know how important I think having that step-by-step, graded exposure system, having that in place. Whether you do it one way, whether you do it another way, the beauty of this profession is there's no right or wrong. And David Gray, he's a therapist who, I remember the call when I spoke to him. It was before last year's, around this time last year, January 2019, and he was skeptical. He was a therapist who, I remember I think he said something to me like, well, I know you're going to try to sell me it and stuff like that, and we ended up having a chat, and I got in his voice that he was very, very skeptical of being sold to. And again, if you've ever spoke to myself or any of the team, you'll know that, look, we'll ask you some questions, we'll see if you're a good fit, because the last thing I want is a therapist in there who's not the right fit, who's not in it for the right reasons, or who's just as I said, not open-minded. So what Dave has done is he's gone on and he's not only gone from seeing 2 to 3 patients a week to now, we had a conversation last week, the refresher, taking the content, making it his own, developing the content. I've learned a lot from him. Other therapists have learned a lot from him in the refresher courses. And not only that, but he's now seen therapists all over the world, he's seen patients all over the world in the terms of online clients and actually able to help them as well. And that's a big thing for me, is that I can actually get a massive amount of satisfaction that, the stuff that we've been able to help therapists get confidence and clarity on, that they now can take that and help people the other side of the world. So I personally get a great buzz from that. So there's lots of key topics in this week's episode that I'm going to touch upon after you hear from Dave. He's made some great points, and as I said, he's an inspiration for everyone else out there who was starting with 2 to 3 patients a week to now, having essentially the exact thing he said to me was he has the right amount of patients he wants now. He's happy and content with what he's seen, and I think he mentions obviously enjoying his day-to-day work. Okay, so without further ado, let's hear from Dave, and I'll see you on the other side with some key topics that he talks about and key points that I would just want to discuss a little bit further.
Cheers to Dave for coming over and going on to the podcast. So Dave, just wanted to ask you first of all, I suppose, before you joined the mentorship, what were your biggest struggles in the clinic? Like what were you doing? What were your main kind of attractions for joining the mentorship, I suppose?
Thanks for having me, Shane. Always good to be here. Before I joined, as I said, I think I was kind of speaking to Dave before I joined, there wasn't necessarily one big struggle. It was just a lot of little things, and I felt like everything could be better in terms of how you greet clients, maybe how you attract clients, how you treat clients, your follow-up, kind of the system that you use and all that. So it was a little bit of everything. Thought I was doing everything fairly okay, but it just always obviously wanted to be a bit better. And yeah, the whole mentorship attracted me to it rather than one specific thing, you know.
Just taking everything to the next level, really.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just, for me at least, I'm always trying to get a little bit better all the time. There's always people that you can learn from. And it's just when you see Dave talking and yourself, obviously, there's so much that you can learn rather than just one little thing, you know.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's a good point that actually. I think we've just been encouraging all the therapists like here to like almost on everything score yourself out of 10 sometimes, and like pick your weak points out, because it's hard when you're good at what you do sometimes as well. It's hard to spot the things that you need to improve on, and there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And how did you first come across the mentorship?
I think actually I met Alan, who was on maybe the last podcast or a couple of podcasts ago. I met him, I didn't really know him, and he was just chatting, and he just said how good it was, and from there I kind of kept an eye on things, and I guess some social media stuff started popping up, and that some of your marketing stuff is quite good.
Once you see one video, you're going to see tons of videos after that.
You're in. So it just kind of popping up, and then I saw that, I can't remember when exactly I joined, but yeah, there was the mentorship was reopening again, so just sent a message to Dave and we had a chat from there.
Nice.
So
And I suppose, what were your initial, not doubts, but like reservations before you joined? What were the sticking points for you?
Yeah, I guess reservation wise, like same as doing any course, and I've done a lot of courses over the years. You just, if you're going to invest in something, you want to make sure that things it's worth the money, like, you know. And not even with my education, I'm not even necessarily like, can I make money back off this, but will it just make me a little bit better therapist or better person in general, maybe, you know. Reservation wise, actually a little reservation was that I saw some of the videos and a little bit of the marketing stuff, and I actually saw that you guys were kind of using some of the techniques that I was already using, but obviously a bit differently. So I was like, oh, do I know this stuff? Do I not know it? Or things like that. So I guess when I actually spoke to Dave about that, then it was like, actually, here's a guy at the very, very top of the game using some things, and some obviously has learned from some really smart people. And he's found a way to integrate all these different approaches into kind of one clinical session, which maybe I was trying to do, but he's so much more experienced, and you guys are like right as good as it gets. So it was kind of a little bit like, do I know it, or actually, if I do know it, can I apply it as well as I could, you know?
Cool. So kind of like what it actually is and what it can do. I think that's a good point. And even as the mentorship kind of evolved, and like, you know, I did loads of courses, Dave did loads of courses and stuff like that, and it kind of was like, it started off just with that, where there's loads of information everywhere, and then Dave's managed to get it into a system. I think that I mean, that's what attracted me to work with Dave as well. Was it's accelerated my learning curve, I suppose, in terms of putting all this stuff together. So I think that's a good point. It's not, there's nothing groundbreakingly new or anything with it, but it's just bringing it all together into like an assessment system.
Yeah, exactly. And these, like, everyone has good stuff. All these courses, you'll always pick up a few different things, but then sometimes it's like, how can I actually apply that with what I already know? And like, that's what the mentorship probably does better than anything else.
Cool. And so just thinking back, and I know it's a while ago now, so trying to refresh the brain a little bit. I've done a lot since, so I was trying to think back, but can you remember your first kind of thoughts, your first impressions, like when you first joined, you know, the couple of weeks? How did you find it?
Yeah, well, brilliant, to be honest, from the word go. Like, in terms of the whole team, the support you get, you can literally write to anyone. Like, I think I had a problem like logging in on the first day for some reason. It was to do with my cookies on my computer, and I just sent an email, and within 2 minutes someone was back to me and it was sorted, like, you know. And it was just continuously that type of thing where no matter where you turned, if you needed something, the answer is there for you. Like, all the content is shot so well, it's so clear. There's absolutely no fluff in terms of if something isn't relevant, it's just not there really, you know. It's just not in the mentorship. It's not part of the content. So initial thoughts were brilliant, and then obviously anyone that knows Dave and yourself knows that continue to over deliver all the time.
I was just going to laugh there because it's funny you say that we're doing the content, because we always think, we look back on the content for the year before, because it's always coming on a bit more, get better at teaching. It's like, so we've just revideoed the whole thing again. Just because again, it's trying to get it more applicable, more easy to implement, rather than having the stuff that you don't need there. And like, it's all the research. It's the first incarnation of mentorship had all the research and stuff like in the core content, but it was just too much for some people. Whereas the research is there now, but you know, you can go and read that at your own leisure. Want the content to be very just, it's not a master's. You can go in, take the information and use it Monday morning in the clinic. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same with your clinical session. You're trying to, in clinic with people, you're trying to trim away the unnecessary stuff all the time, aren't you? Not trying to sell someone short, but like what actually works, get down to the meat and bones of it. I think the mentorship is the same, and I think even like some of the updates that I've seen since it's continuing to do that and just trim away the stuff and continue to add new stuff or refine the things that are there already.
Oh, definitely. Like these weekends, we've got the refresher weekend this weekend, obviously, and like therapists like yourself coming over, that constantly update things as well. You know, we always learn something from that, because I think that's one of the big values in my eyes, is getting all these group of therapists thinking the same way into a room and just troubleshoot problems then and come up with things. So it's always changing. And I suppose then thinking back, so obviously like 90-day course over the first 3 months or so, like what did you start to implement straight away? What results did you start to see? How did you find it?
I'm someone who has to implement something straight away, because I don't learn very well necessarily by reading something and kind of stewing over it for a little while. I have to see something and I have to practice it straight away. So literally, like, you watch a video and it's not like you're experimenting on clients, and it's not that different of what you're doing, but literally, like, I'm just implementing things straight away and getting results straight away with every client. Like, your results improve. There's probably not a client that could walk in the door anywhere that I wouldn't be fairly confident that I could help. Obviously, there's extreme cases, but I think you could still have a fair crack at anyone who came in.
And I was going to say, like you say, we don't experiment with the clients, which obviously the word experiment's a bit a dodgy word.
Yeah, probably that word.
But it is, like we do, it's trial and error, isn't it? Yeah. It's having something that you can try something, retest, check if it's worked real quickly, and if it's not working, then you can move on straight away, rather than spending a half an hour doing something, then realise at the end of the session, you know, that hasn't done what I wanted it to do. Whereas I think having a system where you can actually just try something, see if it works. Okay, that's not working, I can move on. Or the flip side, okay, that's worked really well. Okay, now what can I do next to take that to the next level?
Exactly, and it's to do with experimentation is a bad word, but if your clinical reasoning is quite good, everything is a little bit of a guess. Everyone's nervous system is obviously a little bit unique, or is unique. So, but if you have good clinical reasoning, you have a fairly good educated guess as to what's going to happen. You don't necessarily know how they're going to react to it, but you're fairly sure that, like, my input should have a positive result here. Definitely, you know. So it comes back to clinical reasoning, which the mentorship helps with. And if you can get that right, if you can get that stuff right, then the techniques are pretty easy after that.
No, definitely. I think that's it. And I think the mentorship content, and like most content, to be fair, not even just in the mentorship in general, it's the content and the exercises are simple, but it's the reasoning behind it. And then what we find now is, like, training therapists in the clinic, and that is when they hit a roadblock, it's normally a clinical reasoning issue. So it's normally the thought process behind it rather than the actual exercise itself or whatever.
Exactly. And even an exercise, if you're struggling to coach an exercise to someone, it's probably because you actually don't understand what you're trying to get out of it, rather than the actual exercise itself. So why are you doing it? And it obviously helps with that a lot.
Definitely, and I think that's something that it's just evolving all the time. I'm always getting better at that, and Dave's always getting better at that. I'm sure you're always getting better at that. I think that's a therapist's journey, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's show. For more clinical content and tips to help you implement this content in the real world, please visit thegotophysio.com for more information, including my 6-step patient adherence checklist, which you can download for free, And also there's more blog content that helps you implement this stuff in the real world. You'll also find links to my YouTube show, the Go-To Physio show, as well as lots of more information to help you become the go-to therapist, helping real patients get real results in the real world.
Perfect. And so thinking back now to kind of where you are now, and I know you've done a lot of other stuff since as well, but like where you are now to where you were before you started the mentorship, what's your journey kind of been like?
Yeah, I'm busier.
Yeah, good. Good and bad.
Good and bad. We were just chatting about it. Yeah. But constantly trying to refine that so you're not busy doing tasks that aren't necessarily paying the bills, let's say, or aren't necessarily helping clients. So I guess things are a little bit more streamlined. How I book clients in is a little bit better. How I follow up with them is a little bit better. And a lot of that is really is thanks to the mentorship, because even though I've actually done a business and marketing degree in the past, in a different life, it's very hard to apply that stuff in a way that works.
No, definitely.
So yeah, journey wise, like I'm busier, I'm getting better results than ever, making more money than ever, and happier than ever probably in terms of the work I'm doing, and more confident and more relaxed about the work I'm doing. Don't feel like I'm under pressure to get a result, because actually you kind of have an understanding of what's going on, and you're confident that you can help anyone.
I think that's the big thing as well. I think like all the results are good, obviously, but the main thing is genuinely enjoy your job more, because you're getting the results that you want to get with patients, and you're getting better results. So patients are happier, you're happier, and everything else is kind of a knock on of that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, definitely. And I think you raised a good point there. We talked that with somebody else as well. I can't remember if it was on a podcast or a video, but when you get busy, it's almost like you have to streamline everything else, because you don't have time now to do the usual stuff that you would have done before and stuff like that. So it does bring its own problems, but they're all good problems. It's like taking it to the next level now, business skills, and kind of building it from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Not perfect. Cool. So thinking kind of anybody now kind of who's thinking about starting a mentorship or not sure where to go next in terms of courses and stuff, just general advice. Mm-hmm. What would your advice be to them?
Generally, I would always say invest in your education. I recommend it to several people that they do the mentorship, and I genuinely feel like it would have to go very, very wrong for you to forget it or to regret doing the mentorship. I can't see why you would, to be honest with you. I don't know if anyone ever has, but
well, we haven't had it
yet. Genuinely sort of like, even if you take your time going through it or whatever, don't necessarily finish it in the 90 days. If you took 6 months, 9 months, like, the content is there, and it's not outdated, it's there for you to learn, and it's there for you to apply. If you watched one video a week, you definitely get one result in clinic that week that you wouldn't have gotten previously. And even that one result could streamline into, or could kind of flow into 10 referrals from it, you know? So invest in your education. If you're unsure, like, someone could message me, someone could message you, Dave.
Just chat about it.
I
think it's a good point, and go back to like people maybe who, like any course, I think you get out of it what you put into it, and I think going the most recent kind of incarnations of it, we've definitely made the processes hopefully a lot easier, so people can keep up with it a lot better. And I suppose the only people who maybe didn't get the value out of it initially were people who maybe didn't keep up with the content, they fell off with the content, but like you say, it's not really a 90-day course. You know, you can come back on then for the next class, and then I think everybody eventually has come back on and they've gone through the content eventually. But obviously things happen sometimes, things come up and people fall off, but eventually they come back on, and like I said, it's lifetime access, and it's not really 90 days, it's a lifetime kind of journey with it. Definitely. Cool. And I suppose for yourself, Dave, then just like plans for the future, how's it like in terms of your own clinic and your own thoughts?
Kind of flying by the seat of my pants at the moment. Because as we said, I'm quite busy. I'm just trying to keep chipping away as I am. No major plans. I kind of need to. I've been thinking about that on the plane over. Actually, like, what am I going to do? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? Maybe not necessarily working in clinic like 40 or 60 hours a week type of thing, but I guess that's that might come to maybe hiring someone else or something like that. So
See how it goes,
we'll see how it goes, but just happy where I am at the moment.
It's like all growth is like that. There's chaos at first, streamline it, systemize it, and then okay, now what do we do next?
Exactly, yeah. So it's like maybe 6, 8, 12-month blocks of that, where it's like it's going okay, bit of chaos, and then going okay again.
We have the same. Every time we start to settle down and things start to run smoothly, something else comes up. Like well, let's do this, and then it takes off, and every year it's back again.
It comes up with another idea.
Exactly. No, sweet. And cheers for coming on to the podcast, Dave. Pleasure having you, and look forward to the refresher weekend this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shane. Always a pleasure.
So thanks again to Shane, the lead therapist or lead coach here at the Go-To Therapist Mentorship, for asking the questions there to Dave. And Dave said some really important points, and Shane also, and a couple of things that I want to pick up on here that I think is very important for therapists to reflect. And, the cat's out of the bag, even though I've been saying this for years, since 2015 when we started this, the value in the mentorship, it's not the assessment techniques, it's not the hands-on techniques, it's not the rehab techniques, it's not the high-level rehab techniques, it's the structure, okay? And underpinning all that, and we had this last week, we had a 2-day mentorship refresher course with therapists from the mentorship to get to come to Huddersfield in person. We do them in Ireland, we're doing them in Australia and America next year, but they get to come, and one of the first things I said to them, and this fits in with what Dave said there, is what you need to get from this weekend, okay, is the clinical reasoning. Because a lot of them, they were getting bogged down and obsessed with some of the tests, and I just said, just step back, relax, and understand what you're actually looking at rather than trying to learn off this or that, okay? So that's very important. And, Dave kind of alluded to it as well, where he said he didn't feel under pressure that hopes, that something works, okay? Where he can now relax because he understands where he's trying to get the patient to. But most importantly, he understands on a higher level that if one hands-on technique or one rehab exercise doesn't work, that's fine, because there's various different ways we can get load through tissues, that we can get the nervous system to desensitize, that we can get the person from A to B. But the key thing is understanding where the person is now, which is A, and where we're getting them to, which is B. And that's the structure that we teach on the mentorship. As I said, I've taken loads of various courses over the years. I don't necessarily agree with some of the mechanisms that maybe the therapists or the course leaders are teaching, which is fine. I respect that, okay? But what I've done essentially is just taken all of this stuff, looked at the science, and said, you know what, they're getting results, why is that, okay? And what that's actually allowing you to do when you look at it at a higher level and bring it right back to physiological principles, okay, which we teach a lot in the pre-course content, is it actually allows you to simplify things even more, okay? And when you simplify things even more, you get even more clarity, okay? You relax and you know, understand where you're going. And your physiology changes when you're talking to a patient, your authority changes, their belief and confidence in you as a therapist changes, in my experience, okay, and in my opinion, and something magic happens there in terms of the patient adherence, okay? So there is no magic exercise, there is no psoas release, there is no magic something release that's going to change a world, okay? Because fundamentally, that person needs to be exposed to loads specific to them, okay, in their environments, okay? And as I said, the speed of movement, the load tolerance, that's all critical, okay? So it's not just about one magic exercise that you're going to get from the mentorship. What you get from the mentorship is a fundamental understanding. We help you clinically reason, okay, why ultimately you're doing something. And that's very, very powerful, okay? And that's something that I want you to really understand and maybe reflect from this podcast. And look, if you don't come on the mentorship and you've got your own structure step-by-step system, that's absolutely wonderful. But I just encourage you to avoid getting into the habit of becoming reliant on one or two techniques, whether it's hands-on or one or two exercises, because the day that doesn't fit to the patient, okay, is the day that ultimately you're in trouble, okay? And again, the brilliant analogy from one of my colleagues, Carl Morrissey, was telling me about the cockpit years ago, where a lot of these US pilots were crashing the planes. and they were doing the measurements, for the cockpit size compared to the size of the pilots, and they found that the size of the cockpit specific to all the pilots, not one pilot fitted the average, or I think it was the average size of the pilots. Not one of them fitted into the ideal dimensions for the cockpit. So what they did then was they made the cockpit adjustable. Okay, and then that reduced the crashes massively. And I think that's what we need to do with our patient treatment plans, and that's what we certainly teach in the mentorship, is that you've got a patient that you can adapt your exercise repertoire, your understanding of what you're trying to achieve at your hands-on, because you know where you're trying to get that patient to. Now, we've obviously got our foundations, we've got our physiological principles that we need to adhere to, but once you have the ability to adapt your rehab, and you've got more than one way to get the person from A to B, then that can be very, very powerful, because then you feel less pressure going, oh God, I hope this, psoas release or glute release, or I hope when I stick my elbow on the glutes and they get up that they feel a little bit better. Okay, because again, fundamentally after the session 2 to 3 to 4, that's the critical time, in my opinion. I talk about the 2 to 3 to 4, 3 to 4 session slump. That's the critical time where the load tolerance is critical, okay, where we get from that kind of nicey on the bed, touch your toes, backward bend, all of that stuff, to actually being able to take that person to the next level and actually manage a low tolerance in the real world, with not only physical stressors but emotional stressors placed upon their body as well. Okay, and I think that's what Dave is getting on. And then the last thing I want to touch upon is understanding the patient journey. And Dave himself had a marketing degree, a business marketing degree, and it's hard to apply that stuff in the real world. But the nice thing is, and I've said this from day one, if you're authentic, you're honest, and you give an honest opinion to people, they'll see that straight up for what it is. Okay, and if you're authentic and honest, then you won't go wrong. And as I said, I've got no issues, giving someone, look, an honest opinion. This is what I'm thinking it's going to take. Obviously, everyone's different. It may take a couple of sessions more, a couple of sessions left, but realistically, this is what I think it's going to take. But not only that, just before I've said that, I'm actually talking them through what's going to happen in the step-by-step plan in the context of their life, in the context of their previous injuries, making that plan specific to that person. And when you've the clarity to do that, then your practice goes to the next level, in my experience. And that was the key thing from the refresher course this weekend. It's all about the higher level critical thinking, which the Go To Physio podcast, we're 20 episodes in now, it's been a mixture of critical thinking and practical applications. And I've done that deliberately. And now we're showing you how therapists are actually applying this. Because as I said, this all sounds great, but unless you can apply it into the real world, then, it's limited value. Okay, and that's what the mentorship's all about. It's giving you the ability to apply this stuff in the real world, but have an adjustable cockpit, so to speak, so that you can make your graded exposure program specific to that person. Okay, Dave, he's busier than ever. He's happier than ever. He's content, and that's a great feeling. And we've had a lot of therapists like that, a lot of chartered physios who have said to me, you know what, I was thinking about quitting. And that's not bullshit. That's God's honest truth. But quite a few said, I was thinking about quitting. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And they actually enjoy their jobs again, because they have the ability to make this stuff specific to the person. Okay, so very, very important to understand that it's not about an exercise, it's about having that structure in place and that critical understanding, and it all goes back, in my opinion, to clinical reasoning. Okay, and that's why on Twitter, on Facebook, I'll always bite my tongue. I'll never make a comment about this or that, because you've no understanding of the person's clinical reasoning of why they're using an exercise and where that exercise fits in the graded exposure load tolerance. Okay, whereas you see a lot of therapists just bang, 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 wanting to sound smart. Okay, so again, it's understanding the patient's journey, where they were before, where this fits in the graded exposure program, and where they're going to go next on the back of that. Okay, once again, thank you for joining me this week. Another great episode. And in next week, we're going to take it again another step further. I'm going to show you how to apply that clinical reasoning in the real world with a very, very talented osteopath. Okay, so I'll see you on the next episode. If you want more information, head over to www.thegotofysio.com. And if you want more mentorship information, www.thegotofysio.com/mentorship. But as I said, over at thegotofysio.com, there's loads of resources. There's the Go to Physio show. You've got the details of my book if you want to pick the book up, outlining the system in more detail. You've got the podcast, you've got the blogs, and you've also got the patient adherence checklist. So lots of great resources there to help you apply this stuff in the real world and make an impact with your patients, enjoy your work, and have that confidence and clarity, and ultimately earn that reputation as that go-to therapist. Okay, so I'll see you on the next episode. Once again, thanks for your attention. Absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's show. For more information, please visit www.thegotofysio.com, where you can download my 6-step patient adherence checklist absolutely free, as well as read the accompanying blog that goes with today's episode. We've got lots of cheat sheets and clinical content to help you implement to get real world results with real patients that ultimately helps you become the go-to therapist and allows you to build a profitable, busy private practice or become that go-to therapist in professional sport. I'll speak to you soon on the next episode.